You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Beau Floyd.
Hello.
Beau, tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
I am, let's see. This is an interesting question for me all the time because I don't really know how to answer it. It's pretty simple, I guess. Um, I'm a 33-year-old male from Virginia, and I'm a chef. My wife and I own and operate a restaurant here in Harrisonburg.
So how did you become a chef? Like, has this always been a passion of yours, is cooking food? Like a lot of people consider it like an art form. I mean, I feel like whenever you're making or creating or designing a plate, you're presenting it to somebody. It's basically your creation.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that on some levels, on a major level, really. I think, well, hmm, as far as how I got into cooking, um, that's a pretty long story.
Well, we got time for it for sure.
Right on. Well, um, so you're not real quick. You're not running this live or anything, right? Like you're gonna cut it and.
No, but I don't do a lot of editing, so they're gonna have these long pauses.
Okay, cool. All right, that's good to know. So I was 14 years old. I got a worker's permit and started working at a Burger King, in the town I was living in. Um,
You started at Burger. Hold on, you started at Burger King.
yeah, when I was a teenager.
Why did you choose Burger King? It seems like everybody's always complaining about working at McDonald's.
Dude, yeah, they complain, rightfully so. It sucked. It was not fun. But I was 14. I just needed a job. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point.
And Whoppers are better. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Well, Burger King would hire me.
No.
Um, and like I said, I mean, I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do with my life at that point. I was just looking for a job, got one. Um, Turned out I was pretty good in the kitchen. There's not really a lot of cooking involved at Burger King. It's more assembly, you know. And you have to be able to move fast. You have to be able to multitask. And
You just kind of preferred the environment, the lifestyle a little bit, it seems like. It seems like being in a kitchen felt appropriate.
um, at the time, again, really, there wasn't anything like that for me. That all kind of changed once I got a job in a real restaurant. I was 19. Got a job in a fine dining restaurant, where my chef there really kind of opened my eyes to what cooking really is. And yeah, a lot of it for me was the lifestyle. It was, you know, you do tend to find some of the riffraff in the kitchens, working in restaurants. I definitely fit in with that crowd. Um, and
One of the most hardest jobs is, I think, working in the kitchen. I don't think a lot of people understand that. It seems like, oh, why don't you get a serving job? Why don't you get a dish job? Why don't you get this? It's like there's a lot of complications. It's why a lot of servers and people that work in the restaurant business, they move from place to place a lot of the time, even though you might be a chef somewhere for a couple of years and then move on to another place. It's just because there becomes a lot of tension in the kitchen. It's a very private and also somewhat public opening spot. And when I mean that, I mean is when you're cooking, it's supposed to be a private thing. It's supposed to be you making an ingredient, making a dish. No one else is supposed to kind of come into your area. But when you're moving in a kitchen, especially some small quarters places, it becomes very, very, I guess, people in your personal space moving around you, trying to get their order done while you're trying to get your order done. You're feeling rushed. If you have a certain time or let's say like lunch hour or something, you got to constantly be pumping out meals. It makes it very, very difficult. And then to only add on top of that, how hot it gets in the kitchen as well.
yeah, man, totally. There's a lot to working in the kitchen that makes it difficult. All of the things you said for sure. It's a different beast altogether when considering employment. Like and not everybody can survive in the kitchen. Um, the personal space thing is, you kind of get used to that, and really you you learn to almost become a family with the people that you work with. You get really tight, really close. A lot of kitchens, a lot of restaurants, the people that work in those spaces hang out with each other after work, you know.
Hopefully, if they like each other. I work at a hotel and we have a restaurant staff, and I feel like it's the sous chef and then the main chef. They're constantly at each other's throat. Like somebody wants to do something this way, the other person wants to do it this way, and they're just going back and forth, bitching and arguing. It's like, whoa. And people, like, when they get a job there, they only last 2 weeks. They're like, I can't handle the pressure. I can't handle, like, trying to crank out these orders. Everybody's just being aggressive towards each other. It's like,
Oh yeah.
I could see where you'd want love in the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely have that. When temperatures flare in the kitchen, man, they flare for sure. Like, people say things to each other that sometimes you just, I don't know. I mean, I've seen a number of people crying or get so pissed off that they just quit for sure. Um, the pressure is immense.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of the job fields that you really need to work from the ground up on. You need to start off like a dishwasher, you need to move over to a server, you need to work like all different aspects of it as well, and then kind of work your way up. When you own your own business, such as yourself, going and venturing off into that pathway, you want to have all your spots covered. You want to know where the difficult positions are, and you want to make sure you still stay influenced inside of your little community as well.
Yeah, definitely. Being a chef is something that you really have to, you know, there that you can go about it a lot of different ways, work experience, culinary school, whatever. And like I always tell people, like, if you think you want to be a chef, get a job in a restaurant first and check it out, feel it out. Because I mean, I've seen people, heard of people, going to culinary school, get out of culinary school, find out either A, they don't like it at all, because they know nothing about it, you know, or B, they just can't do it. They're literally not capable, because prior to wasting a bunch of money on their education, they had no experience.
What would you
So
say
yeah.
is the most difficult part about being a chef, though? I feel like for me, it would have to be trying not to eat what I created. Because I mean, when I cook a hot pocket, there's no I'm giving it to somebody else. It's going right in my mouth, if anything.
So that's actually, and this is the opposite of to answer your question, but like I get to eat everything I make. Kind of one of the most fun parts about it, and it
Being a
can be
taste
kind of,
tester.
yeah, man. You have to taste what you make, in order to know if it's seasoned appropriately, or even if it's any good or worth putting out. But it's also pretty challenging. I mean, you taste the same thing 15 times in a row, and you start to, like, you don't even know what it tastes like anymore. But I'd say the most challenging part for me is probably just the balance. I mean, like, at this point as a chef, I'm an executive chef, so I'm not just working in the kitchen, I'm working on the line. I have to manage my food costs, my labor costs, everything in the kitchen from the top to the bottom. I'm responsible for, and there are a lot of moving parts. Orders, we use a lot of local vendors. I probably have, shoot, man, 10 to 15 vendors that I have to communicate with. Um,
So focusing on the logistical side of things when it comes to knowing your inventory, how much of this you have on count in case someone's like, "Hey, I want scrambled eggs and chicken tenders for breakfast because I'm an adult and I can do what I want." And they go back there. Next thing you know, they have to come back out. Sorry, we're all out of chicken tenders. You're like, "What?"
yeah, and like it's totally the logistics, and managing the staff. Like, you know, I can't have eyes everywhere all the time. So it's like this one thing happened. It's a minuscule mistake or accident that I didn't see. No one came to me with, and then the guest ends up receiving the opposite end of this mistake that then they take it sometimes as like a personal offense, almost, is how it seems like, or just it ruins their experience, which is the most important thing. And it kind of it falls down and makes everybody look bad, but ultimately it falls on me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're owning a business. See, the crazy thing about when you own a business, and such as when you work in it, which you probably have kind of figured out, is the whole fact that when you start doing that, you start to realize that, like, when something is not going properly, something's out of place, such as someone's slacking off, someone's not doing their job appropriately, it messes up the whole machine. I mean, much as the next guy is myself, what our bosses when they're not around, what we do. But it's truly that, though. You want to make sure, especially when you're owning a restaurant, you have times when you're busy, and you have times when there's obviously a point for slacking off, like, oh, I'll just clean something, or I'll do this or do that. But when it comes to your rush hours and all these types of things, if some dude just wants to sit there and not do anything, not cook anything, then it's holding everybody else up, and then you're literally pissing off every person down the line.
Oh yeah, totally. So many different aspects of the kitchen of the restaurant, just like you said, are that way and can easily turn into this domino effect that just leads to fucking chaos and destruction.
What would you say is the funnest part about doing your job? Would you say it's creating the stuff that you get to make, or would you say that it falls a little bit more on the fact that you put in so much hard work to see it all pay off in this way?
Oh man, that's a tough call. Definitely creating is fun, um, especially when it turns out to work out. But it is really rewarding. It is really rewarding to kind of at the end of the day sit back and feel accomplished. The sense of accomplishment is really great. Though a lot of times it is kind of a thankless job. Um, I don't know. The best part is either the creativity aspect of it, or even just seeing my crew working together as like a cohesive unit. When I can step back from the kitchen and just watch the kitchen function and flow and operate exactly as it should, I literally have chills right now thinking about that, as silly as that sounds.
Because what you built has literally, you get to see it function. It's like watching a baby start to walk or something. You're like, holy shit, I did this.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
totally.
this thing I created is now moving and actually doing something.
Yeah, and hearing myself say that out loud and agreeing to you saying it, it kind of starts to feel also like very egotistical, which I guess a lot of people function that way, and I don't experience it in that way, but yeah.
Dude, the reason I always call my farts if they're mine or not, like if I'll admit to it if it's mine, it's because I created that shit. There was a bunch of different influences that went into that masterpiece that you get to whiff in your nose, and someone goes, "Holy shit!" So like that's my dumb example, obviously, but it's not egotistical at all. You work your ass off. You should benefit from the glory of it too, to see it actually functioning as well. Maybe not going around like, why you're all lucky that you're here is because of me. It's like, no, just realize like, holy shit, like what I have right now is starting to build up. I mean, it's no better feeling than creating something and then watching it start to, benefit you in a way.
Speaking of speaking of the parts, I don't know if you want to put this part on or not, but my kitchen manager came to me the other day. He was like, he goes, "You smell that?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Me either. Start farting." And, so I don't know. Anyway, I have a 14-year-old son. I did it to him. He laughed
Dude,
his
I
ass
still
off.
have that childish humor, man. I think it's definitely needed. It seems like the world gets a little bit tense sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta let it go a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, when I
yeah.
do these podcasts, though, like all this that we're talking about, it's all staying in there, man. I don't edit any of this out. So like I'm
Nothing comes out.
that's why it's what the name of it is because it's just random conversation. But
I want to. I want to watch what dumb shit I say then next.
when it comes to like the kitchen aspect of it, like how did you decide that you wanted to venture off and create your own business? Did you just feel like you've done it so much that you just didn't want to work for anybody else anymore? I feel like that's what chalks up to a lot of people starting and venturing off in their own company.
Yeah. I guess it's every chef's dream, or any professional's dream who's in an industry doing something they really care about, to want to work for themselves. You do tire of just doing someone else's bidding all the time, especially when you have a good work ethic, which I consider myself to have. I just kind of after a while, you're like, I'm working so hard, kind of to what avail? Like, where is this leading for me? And in this industry, kind of the the place to go is up and into owning your own place. I did kind of luck into this. So my wife, when we met, she was working on the business plan for this restaurant, Food.Bar.Food, with her then business partner and chef. And so over the years, and things basically about 3 years in, 3.5 years in, um, we bought him out, and I took over as the chef. And it wasn't like, oh, I think I want to try my hand at cooking. Like, this is what I've done my whole life. I was a chef when we met. Actually had two jobs when we met. So I lucked into to this business. But yeah, it is something that I think everyone aspires to do who is a cook or a chef that knows that that's what they want to do for the rest of their life. You know what I mean?
Well, especially when you're thinking of creating something, like what types of things have you learned just through cooking that you find that you favorite and then some that you dislike? Like for me, I feel like cooking anything with the stove is the most tasking process, just on the aspect of it taking forever to fucking make. Easily making a bowl of cereal is a hell of a time easier than doing something that involves the oven where you have to preheat and all these inconceivable things that my just attention span can't, keep in contact with. But I feel like, especially when you start figuring out what you want to make and what you want to like, oh, well, I like doing seafood style stuff. That also goes into the concept of what your restaurant is going to be.
Mm. Um, well, as far as what I like to make, what I or don't like to make, there really honestly isn't much that I don't like to make. I really don't like assembling the same thing over and over. Like, well, what I hate scooping cookies or scooping anything. Like those little dishers with a thumb trigger that pushes whatever you're making. Like a cookie scoop. I hate dishing things out. Like, just cookie scoop, cookie scoop, cookie scoop. It's the worst. And even just really simply, like, my favorite thing to do in the kitchen probably is work with my knife. Um, that's really fun. Every time I pick up my knife, I'm practicing with it. Uh, but shoot, man, I kind of lost track there. Can you get me back on track?
what what is the all-time favorite thing that you like to make, and like how did you discover upon that? Like you started off working at Burger King and then you're going through the kitchen industry, so you're learning how to cook more and more stuff. What do you favorite towards?
Oh man, I I get asked this question a lot. Kind of, what's your favorite thing to cook? And honestly, I don't really have a good answer for that. Um, I really don't. Our restaurant is the theme is global comfort food. So we're not like,
So you go all over. We're talking about Japan cuisine, Chinese cuisine, American cuisine.
everything. Yeah. Anything that you know m- I can research and learn about and put my own kind of spin on. Um, Anything and
Well,
everything.
how do you decide to research something though? Like, where does that come up? Do you just see something on television? Like, what is that thing that person's making? Or do you go out and try something and like, I wonder what this is?
Yep. Pretty much just explore. We do have two kids in the house, and we're business owners. We don't get out as much as we used to. But totally just from eating out. My wife buys me lots of books. I've got a pretty solid Kindle collection. Um, she's subscriptions to magazines. It's always nice. Like, magazines are great because it kind of keeps you in the know and the trend. Food is a really trendy thing, and as much as like I kind of came up hating trends and like not wanting to be part of any kind of trend, you kind of have to rely on it in this industry. um, but it's a lot more fun in food. So yeah, just kind of reading and taking in as much as I can, talking to people. um, you know Harrisonburg, the city we live in, is a pretty culturally diverse city. So anytime I'm talking to someone that I haven't met before, we end up in conversation. I try to bring up food on some level, ask them what they're into. Um, just keeping my eyes and ears open and keeping my mind open. It it is my life. It is the lifestyle that I live. So it's not that difficult to do, you know.
Now, would you say like most people call themselves like, they prioritize a little bit more when they cook towards pasta, towards certain things? What is your favorite thing though? I know you deal into all realms of cuisine, but you got to have a specific favorite. Come on now.
All right. Man,
If you're a
you know,
vegan, you're not cooking burgers. I know that.
yeah, right. So this is kind of silly because one of my favorite things to eat. So I guess it kind of is one of my favorite things to cook is pork belly. I really, really love pork belly.
Why pork belly? I
Um,
feel like I don't know. That one seems like I'm a fitness guy, so like when I hear that, all I think of that's just straight fat. Like, a lot of people like steaks. When I can't really cook red meat, it starts to kind of make me a little bit nauseous a little bit. I'll eat a chicken breast fine. I'll eat anything like that, but anything that deals into the realm of cinnamon, just from bad experience, I just can't hook on to it.
right. Well, well, pork belly is like cooking it isn't really that technical. It's kind of tedious. You just kind of low and slow with it, and you have to season it appropriately. But it's really indulgent, I think, is why I like it. It's fatty, it's rich, it's sweet, it's got the savory flavors that I need. It's like it carries flavor really well, and when you get it right, yeah, it just melts in your mouth. It's it's amazing.
What factors would you say come into play to I love you sound like you're drooling already. When it comes into so many factors that go into like something tasting good, what do you consider the most important? A lot of people kind of prioritize the idea of dressing it up, making it look nice, like the art of plating or whatever. Like, oh, if I put it like this and then drizzle it off to the side, would you say that it's more of the cooking factor, such as like spices or certain things that you add in that really make it your own uniqueness to it? I feel like every chef has their own style or flavor.
Yeah, I think um, the visual aspect is super important. We eat with our eyes first. It's an old saying, I guess. I probably got some part of that wrong, but that's basically how it works. I mean, there have been studies to show that if you have a plate of something, say that the same two dishes put down in front of you, and one is it doesn't look attractive or tasty, then whomever's eating is less likely to enjoy it than if it were put down in front of them in a more attractive form or style. Um, but as far as balance, flavor balance, and putting my own spin on things, those are really important to me. I never want to cop another recipe straight out. Like I look at a lot of recipes for inspiration and motivation, and there are some, like, I'm not gonna make a cake recipe. I'm not a fucking scientist. I can't. I mean, I could probably throw together a cake without a recipe and have it taste okay because I've made a bunch of cakes in my life, or whatever. There are certain things where, like, the science of it is super super important. Like, kind of one misstep and you ruin the whole thing. Um, but flavor balance, I'd say, for me is the most important. I mean, you got to have that balance.
Yeah, you don't want the scales tipping in a certain way. You could put in oregano or something. You're overpowering whatever you're creating. I mean, that's the whole reason I dump oregano on my salads, man, because it makes it taste like Domino's pizza crust.
I bet it does. Yeah, man. Totally. Flavor balance is super super important, and it's a tough thing to develop.
It's
Um,
also like when a food tastes really, really shitty, if you just put ketchup or mustard on it so much to the point, like I know when my dad cooks like a hot dog or something, he burns the living shit out of it. I don't mind it, but it's just whatever he cooks something that's like a burger or whether it's like hot dogs, it tastes like complete trash. And he's like, I always know when you don't like my food. I'm like, why? He goes, because you just drown it out with ketchup. Like that thing is basically you're drinking soup. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I don't know how you mess up this. I'm like, dude, toss that bitch in the microwave. I'll eat it, man. I'm used to eating dollar store chicken sandwiches. This was a few years back. So I was like, I could eat goldfish out of a bag, dog. Like, how do you mess up a hot dog to the point a kid in his 18 or whatever, 19 years old won't eat it?
yeah, I had kind of a similar some similar experiences growing up. My mom wasn't the best cook. Mom, I love you, but we both know it's true. Um, so I totally feel what you're saying. Um, yeah, yeah. Uh,
What's one of your worst kitchen experiences? I can give you one of mine. I was kind of, let's say, boiling fish. And I decided, hey, nobody's home. And this is like everybody in kind of in my family, or at least people I live with now, know that if you're not home, you let me know when you're coming home because I'm probably walking around naked. So I started boiling fish and I left the little handle thing out and I was not paying attention. So I'm in the kitchen, kind of doing my thing. I guess maybe I was probably wearing like low, like boxers or something, but basically nude. And I literally dropped something in front of the stove, and I bend to pick it up. And I just, as I'm coming up, hit my shoulder on the ladle that was out, or like the handle that was out.
oh,
And that's one of the biggest mistakes. If you know anything about even starting cooking, it's always handle in.
yeah.
And I was kind of in a rush and I bumped into it and it just barely stayed on top of the stove. Like, I mean, barely to where like boiling water would have landed all over me. I immediately turned the stove off, went upstairs, put on like 80 different jackets and all this stuff, and then came downstairs and then started cooking again. It was one of those near misses where you're like, holy crap.
Terrified, scared the hell out of you enough to. Yeah. That's another one I kind of struggle with. We've had some pretty serious disasters in the kitchen as far as productivity go. I don't know, man. It's nothing like that. This is kind of a different note, but we had a breaker flip in our kitchen at the restaurant several months back. That we had two coolers and a small freezer um, linked to or plugged into, and we lost everything in all those coolers. I'd say that's, and I know that's not probably really what you're looking for. I can think about something a little more adventurous, but it was pretty devastating walking into the kitchen and have to throw away hundreds of pounds of food that took hours and hours to prepare um, and start over from the beginning on a Tuesday morning.
That's got to be so painful though. Like, imagine you're cooking something and then you have to restart.
Yeah, except it was on the line, so it was everything basically that we had prepped for service. So it was like we had to restart a lot of things, and it was awful. It was awful.
That probably got you guys way sidetracked too, to where the point where you had to work harder just to catch up.
Yeah, totally. I don't know though. Speaking from sort of your perspective there with like disaster, I say it was probably, and this is a long time ago. I haven't had a lot of really bad experiences in the kitchen. I've had a lot of bad burns, a lot of bad cuts,
What's your
but
worst burn?
um, probably I was working at Bella Luna, which is a local sort of farm to table, not Italian, but Italian restaurant here in town. The chef there is really great and talented. And well, anyways, they have a wood oven. They do a lot of stuff in. And at the time, I was working for a different chef there. We were doing, I think it was short ribs in the wood oven, in the wood fired oven, and it gets hot in there. So I pull out this full sheet pan, which is like basically a really long cookie sheet, really long and wide cookie sheet. Um, that has short rib fat, hot, hot short rib fat all on the bottom of it. I pulled it out of the oven, and like I don't know if you're carrying like a big pan of water all the way across the room and it's really full. You kind of got to be careful, or it's like it's gonna spill up and splash on your feet or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like this thing is full of hot grease. I pull it out of the oven. I tilt it towards me just like the tiniest bit, and it starts. I see this like wall of fat start to roll towards me in the bottom of the pan. Tilt it back, overcorrected. There was someone in front of me, so I kind of panicked a little bit, tilted it back towards me a little bit, kind of overcorrected, if you will, and just basically covered like the whole back of my hand, part of the inside of my hand, and a little bit up my forearm.
I bet you don't grow hair there.
No, it's growing. Actually, there is one place on my thumb that I don't really have any hair growing. I never really thought about that.
I never understood grease. I remember my dad gave me this pot and he was like, "Here, he dumped this grease out for me." And like I don't know why, but I guess he was dumping it outside or something. I dumped it instead of on the side off to like where like our grass is already dead or where there's dirt. I just dumped it on like a part of our front lawn, like splashed it out there. There were just yellow spots of grass everywhere on our front lawn. So all you saw was green and then yellow. And he was like, "You see that?" And he's like, "I'm like, yeah." He's like, "That's why you don't pour grease there. That grass is dead and probably not growing back for a long time." I'm like, "Why are we cooking with this? It seems like this is a bad option. Why don't we just choose the healthy way with like nothing but hot pockets? There's no grease involved."
Yeah, because hot pockets are healthy. Yeah.
Dude, those dollar store chicken sandwiches my dad used to buy me through my high school years, man. Those things have nutritional value. There's like 6 grams of protein in that sucker. And for a buck,
In like 6 grams of sodium.
yeah, yeah, there's a hell of a
E-
lot more than that. Trust me.
well, equal parts sodium and protein.
It's basically you're going to a coma after you eat it. He was like, "You're the easiest person to shop for." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "All you do is eat like, I don't know, a bag of Doritos and like just I can go to the dollar store and feed you for like a year." He's like, "I just spend $20, just fill it up with chicken sandwiches." I'm like, "Yeah, they're so simple."
We lived on ramen noodles for a little while when I was growing up. Those are about the same.
Do you think that's kind of where it sparks? Like you're like, I want to figure out how to actually cook so you don't come to a point where you're eating ramen noodles every day. I mean, I lived in a house where like our stove didn't work. So for a year and a half, we were eating nothing but like microwavable shit. Like for dinner, it was ramen noodles or it was something. And like you start getting creative with that shit. You start being like, I'm going to pour some of this spice into it, or I'm going to chop up some carrots and throw it in there and make it elegant. Oh, I'm going to toast a grilled cheese.
Yeah, totally. That was really similar for me. Like when I was a kid, my mom didn't cook a lot. We ate a lot of quick meals, and I did, man. I wanted to know. I wanted to know how to cook, and it turned out I was pretty awful at it. When you're a kid, you're trying to teach yourself how to cook stuff. It's like you just kind of throw whatever you think might taste good or whatever you like it to it. It hardly ever works out.
When you're a kid, you eat when you're hungry. There's no like, I'm gonna prep food. That's not even a thought. Even in my head today, I'm still like, there's no prepping food. I'm just going to start cooking when I get hungry. And then at that point, you're like, you're pulling out your materials. Like I'm pulling out vegetables when I'm cooking. And next thing I know, I'm eating as I'm cooking. And then it's like, oh, and then it's everything has to be kind of right then and there. It's not like, oh, I'm going to wait an hour or I'm going to wait 2 days for this turkey that's in the oven. It's like, hell no, I want that shit now. I don't want anything sitting in a crock pot. But that sucks because the payoff to having that marinate or do something all day, like, dude, there's no better taste either. Like when you get to enjoy something that comes out of an oven, like a nice biscuit, like that layer to it, it's like even though it's not immediate and it takes a little while, it's so much more better when you're sitting down and enjoying it.
Yeah, totally. Meal planning is not a thing when you're a kid or growing up, and sometimes you don't have time for it. But another thing I think that kind of sucks about creating food or making food from scratch, despite the reward that you get, is the cleanup. There's so much more cleanup when you're just kind of cooking by yourself or cooking from scratch, but it's totally worth it. Totally.
Yeah, I got OCD, so I'm a big like, dishes need to be washed off or, at least to the point where there's no food left in it and where it's kind of like cleaned up, the kitchen's cleaned up. Don't get me wrong, when I'm cooking, it's a mess. But when it's over with, I clean up all my stuff. But I know people that'll like they'll create something for like spend all day working on it, then they'll put it in the fridge and they'll come home, grab a bite of it, and they'll leave like a plate just unwashed in the dishwasher. I'm like, how do you do that? Like I think one of the main things, especially being a chef, you understand like how hard it must be to work in like just filth. Like, first of all, working with like dirty utensils and stuff all around you, like it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's totally one of the most important parts of working in the kitchen. I've heard so many times a good chef is a clean chef. Like there's no working in filth. Like you have to clean as you go. Of course, sanitation is huge. I mean, you're feeding ideally the masses.
Yeah, you probably get regulated by the FDA pretty heavily, don't you?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, it's not as heavy as you might think. Really, we have yearly visits from a health inspector, and they're mostly checking for like temperatures to make sure everything's at the right temperature and like to make sure you have everything stored appropriately.
And making sure like the same thing is too, they bring out a lot of regulations that change every year based on like the amount of like consumption that you can do and banning certain things at certain times. I know there was a giant problem with I live in a seafood town. I live in Ocean City, Maryland. So all our restaurants are nothing but seafood, but so many restaurant owners had to throw out a lot of their inventory because there was a giant thing with the market and fish. A lot of their fish were high levels of mercury because of some contamination. Like the FDA were on everybody about that.
Right, like there was a recall, you're saying, on
Yeah.
whatever item.
And I think that makes it difficult when some dude comes up to you and is like, "Hey, you got to throw out half of your inventory." You're like, "What?"
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we've never had that happen, but yeah, that would be awful. We do pretty good when the health inspector comes around, but like I said, really, it's not as bad as you might think with them, but it's more just knowing that we have a responsibility to serve something that is safe for the public to eat. Um, and I just go by the whole, like, if I wouldn't eat it, then I'm not going to serve it thing. So
I know we were talking before a little bit about what constitutes a good meal. I feel like with the way people are so in a rush nowadays, I feel like if you just make it look good, they're going to eat it without even tasting it. I mean, I feel like everybody's so much in a rush that they don't even taste half of the food sometimes.
yeah, yeah, I can see that. A lot of people are in a rush. They want the fast experience. It's awful. It's something that our society and culture is created for us. That, in my opinion, needs to be undone, or would be wonderful if it could be undone. Because I mean, that's really not even what we're about. But you do totally have those people come in. They want to sit down. They want to eat their food. They want to be on their way.
Well, we're trying to dominate the world now with fast food. It's like that's the easiest option for people just to grab a quick bite. Like when you sit down for a restaurant, I think one of the most important things is also the experience as well. Like we want to talk about a chef that's working that has like a signature style or something where you want to come back and enjoy it. My grandfather won't go to fucking Applebee's because he only wants John there, just some guy named John who's a chef that he knows that he's been going to for years now. He's like, I like the way John cooks my burgers. So like I remember every day the week, like we would just go out to eat during the summer. And this was like when I was 15 years old. Literally, he would just pull up, be like, get out of the car, see if John's working. I'm like, are you serious? Like it's dinner time. Like, you know how busy this place is right now? And he's like, go in there and see if John's working. I'm like, dude, he wasn't working all past week. Why would he be working today? And I literally walk in, I literally shout from like the front door, "Hey, is John working?" All this, some person go, "Yeah, John's on staff." I just open up the door. "Grandpa John's here." He's like, "All right, park in the car." Like but that's like the whole thing. He just loved that style and that like thing to it. I'm like, I think that's what creates it too, because when we're sitting down enjoying it, like he would come out back and say hi to my grandpa and start talking to him. They'd be chatting it up like, "Oh, how's college going?" The kid's like, "I'm doing great, man. Like, passing all my classes." And my grandpa's like, "I like to hear that. Like to hear that. You're a hard worker, unlike this kid." And I'm like, "Really?" Like I just mowed your grass and everything. But it was that amazing experience and that camaraderie, I think, that also goes into a restaurant that a lot of people are missing out with fast food.
Yeah, you definitely find that with regulars that some people are looking for the experience, which is really great when they come in and they're looking for an experience because we're trying to give them one, But um, yeah, you do our regulars. It's really great when we form regulars. Like just think about your grandpa. We have a couple who comes in every Saturday or Sunday for brunch. And it's really great to see him. You get to go out to the dining room, say what's up to him, talk to him for a little while, talk about what they'd like to see on the menu, kind of gather some information about their experience. You get honest feedback from those people, and yeah, I kind of short on words here, but I do think.
Well, you deal with the public, so I'm wondering how many times do you have to go talk to a guest, whether it's for a good reason, like let me talk to the chef, I want to compliment him on this dish. The rare chance that ever happens, but most of the time it's probably people complaining. What would you say is one of your kind of most memorable, I guess, things? Like, I mean, being your own business owner, you have to come out behind the kitchen at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I try to make it a point to go out to the dining room and walk around and make sure everything's looking okay. Or if I see a plate come back where the server's throwing most of the dish in the garbage. I try to find out what's going on so I can go talk to the table. Um, it is important to sort of make rounds and be sure everyone's happy and getting the experience they're looking for. But I think I don't get a ton of complaints. I think really I might get more compliments to the chef than complaints, which is really great. Or maybe those are just the ones that I notice because those are the ones that I want to see. I don't know. Um, I think my most memorable and favorite experiences and I don't want to give the wrong idea to your listeners here, like about what Food.Bar.Food is. But I think we're kind of a niche restaurant. We've got some things going on. And I'm not talking trash about any other restaurant or chef in Harrisonburg. I know a lot of great chefs and there are a lot of great restaurants here, but we are doing something different um, from
It's
what
better than Burger King. It's better than Burger King.
it's. Yeah, I'd say. I mean, I guess it's a matter of opinion, but yeah, we are doing something different. It feels special. It's supposed to be special, and I'm trying to create. We are trying to create this like memorable experience that's almost like that's interesting but approachable, right? So
And it can't be kind of manipulated. It's your own style as well. When you look at a restaurant, we got TGI Fridays, capitalizing on that Fridays, but their whole theme and everything to it. You try and create something with your own that sets you apart from all the others.
yeah, totally, and we're definitely accomplishing that goal because I was in the dining room. I don't know, man. I'm 2 or 3 months ago, and I'm talking to a lady who's from out of town. We get a lot of guests from out of town being in a college town, but talking to this lady is she and her husband frequent the restaurant because her daughter goes to college here in Harrisonburg, and she says something to the effect of yeah, we love it here. We come to Food.Bar.Food every time we're in Harrisonburg. This is my favorite spot because the menu's weird, and that she totally meant it as a compliment, though kind of there was a server standing kind of close to us, kind of looked over at me like with a weird face, like what did she just say, kind of thing. But that's probably my favorite bit of feedback that I've ever gotten is we come here every time we're in town because the menu's weird. And I don't hear like, oh, this place is weird. I hear like we come here because we get a unique because this is unique, you know. So that's probably my favorite bit of feedback I've ever gotten.
What's your hopes for the future with your restaurant, or just maybe your style of cooking in general? Like, do you want to expand more out as being like a more monopolized business, such as owning multiple restaurants, or you just want to create a one bigger, better restaurant?
Yeah, we don't really have any goals or aspirations for opening another Food.Bar.Food. We've talked about potentially like opening a smaller place in the future with a slightly different theme that's even smaller, has 20 seats, like just a really tiny spot to do some focused food, um, and uh, and just provide an especially unique and special experience. But that's down the road. Really, our goal is just to improve upon what we're doing now until, well, to continue doing that. Personally, this is my first executive chef position. I've done everything that I do right now at work at other jobs, but I've never been responsible for all of them at the same time. I've never been responsible for creating 3 whole menus all on my own. So for me personally, I really just want to improve my tool bag, my figurative tool bag, my learn as much as I can and become the best chef that I can. So really, it's just about improving what we've got right now as an ultimate goal and doing the best that we can. I mean, my wife and I do work a lot. Um, it would be great to get to a point where the restaurant is functioning and flowing so easily that one of us don't have to be there quite as much. Though as a chef, that'll never really change for me, I don't think, but which is great. But yeah, just to make it successful. Yeah.
How did you come to your conclusion of Food Bar? Like, how did you think of that name?
Well, that was my wife and her previous business partner's name idea, and I'm not really sure how they came to it. I mean, I do know that the focus is food and drink. Like obviously we're a restaurant. I think a lot of people would say, yeah, no shit, like you're focused food and drink, you're a restaurant. But I think it's really almost just, especially to emphasize that, like, you know, we are focused on the food and drink, and the Food.Bar.Food. It's, my wife has won several awards for most creative cocktails in Virginia, in the Valley. Um, so there is quite a bit of focus on the drink. Um,
Do you guys ever fight over who cooks the food? I feel like when you have two chefs in the kitchen, someone like I'm cooking tonight, or maybe I don't want to cook tonight.
oh, no, so she runs we put our heads together to come up with solutions and menu planning. Every aspect of the restaurant we talk about together really before making any kind of moves. But I'm the chef. She's the general manager, but she is an excellent chef. So actually, and at home, she does more cooking than I do at home, which is wonderful. And we never argue over who's going to do the cooking. It's like, I'll cook dinner tonight, and the other person's like, okay, great. you know, that's pretty much the way it works. There's never really arguing over it.
Now she works with in your restaurant as well.
Oh yeah, she's the general manager, and so she manages the front of house. She writes the cocktail menus. Like I just said, she's won most creative cocktails in Virginia. I think the last 4 or 5 years she's gotten that award.
Would you say that makes it difficult just trying to own a business and run a restaurant is when you're both of you guys are working in there together? It feels like, a lot of people say it's hard to work with family and especially dealing with something like, a restaurant business. Would you say that it's probably your kind of worst thing, or would you say it's actually made you guys a better team?
I'd say it's made us a better team. You do hear that a lot, and I get that kind of joke a lot. Like, oh boy, you and your wife run a restaurant together. It's like, yeah, but it's actually pretty great. We have a lot of the same, you know, vision. We hold our staff to the same standards. We carry we have very similar opinions in a lot of different ways. Of course, we have differing opinions in some ways, and sometimes we butt heads, but for the most part, it's really great. I think uh, it is a challenge. I mean, but more of the challenge though comes from balancing the home work life. When you run a restaurant, it's tough. Like, seriously, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of commitment. We just had a baby. We have Actually, today is her 8-month birthday. So 8 months ago today, we had a little girl. We have a
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have a 14-year-old. I have a 14-year-old son. Um, we have a dog and a cat and all that kind of. So, like, balancing that whole like home work life thing, that's probably where the most tension would come from, considering working and operating a restaurant together. But as far as running the restaurant, we do great together.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming out and doing the podcast. It meant a lot to me to be able to talk to you too. And I really want to give you here a minute at the end to kind of promote your business as well so people can find the food bar, man.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate it. And honestly, I'm humbled by the opportunity. I checked you out on Spotify. You got and your Instagram page, doing a lot of really cool stuff. I think this is really sweet. I'm a podcast listener. I listen to mostly right now Last Podcast on the Left. I think they're pretty great. They're funny guys. But I'm gonna be checking you out, and I really appreciate the opportunity. But yeah, Food.Bar.Food. We're a global comfort food restaurant serving, um, inspired cocktails, and we're a scratch kitchen. We provide as much locally sourced ingredient as humanly possible. You can check us out at Food.Bar.Food.com, FOODBARFOOD.com. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for being on this episode Out of the Blank, and stay tuned for our next episode.